Hey everyone, ready to dive deep.
Let's do it.
All right, so today we're tackling a book that's gotten a lot of buzz, Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Definitely a conversation starter.
For sure, and don't let the title throw you off. It's not about becoming some kind of uncaring robot. It's more about, well, how do we figure out what really matters in life? When we're bombarded with so much information and pressure these days.
Exactly. It's so easy to feel pulled in a million directions. Manson really makes you think about where you're putting your energy.
One of the things that really struck me early on was his point about struggle. We often try to avoid it, right? Like we're always looking for the easiest path. But Manson says, what if the struggle is actually the pointee?
Yeah, he argues that it's in those moments of challenge that we really grow, discover ourselves. It's not about seeking out unnecessary hardship, but more like not shying away from it when it's tied to something meaningful.
Makes you think of that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Totally. And a great example Manson uses is the musician Dave Mustaine.
Oh, right, from Megadeth. He was in Metallica for a bit, wasn't he?
He got kicked out right before they hit it super big.
Ouch, I bet that was rough.
You can imagine. But here's the thing. Mustaine could have easily given up, but instead, he channeled all that anger, that frustration, formed Megadeth, became incredibly successful.
So he achieved his goal. You'd think he'd be content, right?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. By his own admission, even with all the success, Mustaine was still pretty unhappy.
What? Why? I don't get it.
This is where Manson's concept of shitty values comes in. Mustaine was constantly comparing himself to Metallica, who were selling out stadiums while he was playing smaller venues.
Ah, so even though he achieved a lot, he was measuring it against the wrong yardstick.
Exactly. And this is something we all do, right? We get caught up in comparing ourselves to others, chasing after things that don't truly matter.
Oh, tell me about it. Social media makes it even worse these days. Everyone's always showcasing their perfect life, but is it really so perfect?
Right. We're constantly bombarded with these external measures of success. Manson argues that these shitty values, things like always needing to be right, chasing pleasure all the time, needing everyone to like you, they actually lead to more unhappiness in the long run.
So how do we break free from that? How do we figure out what our own Daboian values are, the good kind, not the shitty ones?
Well, Manson talks about choosing values that are like grounded in reality, things that are actually within our control. Instead of chasing fleeting pleasures, he says, focus on things like honesty, being kind, contributing something to the world.
Values that come from within, not just from what society tells us we should value.
Exactly. It's about defining success on your own terms.
This is making me think about the whole idea of taking responsibility for our lives, which, now that I say it out loud, sounds kind of daunting.
Yeah, Manson doesn't shy away from that. He actually calls it radical responsibility. But it's not about blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong. It's more about recognizing the power you have to choose your response to situations.
Okay, I'm starting to see the difference. It's not my fault it happened, but rather, okay, it happened, what am I going to do about it?
Exactly. And to illustrate this whole concept, Manson uses a really compelling story about William James.
William James. Ringing a bell, but I can't quite place it.
He was like a pioneering psychologist in the late 1800s. Brilliant guy, but really struggled with depression, even contemplated suicide. He felt trapped by his circumstances, like he had no control.
Oh man, that's heavy. So what changed for him?
He had this breakthrough where he realized he was completely responsible for his own life. Not in a blaming way, but in a way that gave him agency. He couldn't control everything that happened to him, but he could control how he reacted.
Wow, so even amidst all that darkness, he found a way to empower himself.
Exactly. He stopped blaming external forces and started focusing on what he could control, his attitude, his outlook. And through that, he was able to turn his life around and do incredible work.
That's a powerful story, and I think it speaks to something really important. Even when things are tough, we always have a choice in how we respond.
100%. It's like we can choose to be victims of our circumstances, or we can choose to be the heroes of our own stories.
I love that. It's not about pretending everything is perfect, but about recognizing the power we have even in the midst of imperfection.
And that's a really empowering realization.
It is, though, let's be real, putting this into practice, well, that's a whole other deep dive.
For sure. It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not have it all figured out right away.
Exactly. And sometimes just admitting that, hey, I'm still working on this whole not giving a feck thing, that's a step in the right direction.
It's about being open to the process, to the self-discovery.
And maybe, just maybe along the way, we start caring a little less about the things that don't really matter and a lot more about the things that do.
Now you're getting it. It's about figuring out what those things are, those values that light you up, and then having the courage to build your life around them.
One of the things I appreciate about this book is how it tackles these kind of heavy topics, but it doesn't feel like a lecture?
Right. It's like Manson's having a conversation with you, not talking down to you. And that humor, those personal anecdotes he throws in, they really make it relatable.
Totally. He's not afraid to be vulnerable, to admit he doesn't have all the answers, which is kind of refreshing, actually.
Definitely. And it gives you permission to do the same, to embrace the messiness of being human.
Speaking of messiness, let's circle back to the whole not giving effect thing.
Yeah.
Because it's not about being a jerk, right? It's more nuanced than that.
Way more nuanced. It's about being intentional, choosing where you direct your energy.
Hmm.
Some things are just not worth our time and attention, and this book helps us figure out what those things are.
It's like we only have so much energy in a day, so why waste it on things that ultimately don't matter?
Precisely. Things like stressing over that rude comment someone made online, or comparing yourself to some idealized version of someone else. It's exhausting.
Ugh, social media is the worst for that. Everyone's always presenting this perfect, curated version of themselves, and it's easy to get caught up in that comparison game.
And Manson would argue that comparison game, that's driven by those shitty values we were talking about earlier.
Okay, so let's say we're on board with this. We want to stop giving so many fracks about the wrong things. How do we actually do that?
Well, it starts with identifying those core values, the ones that truly resonate with you, what's important to you at your core.
And not just what society tells us is important, right?
Exactly. This is about digging deeper, figuring out what makes you tick. Is it honesty, creativity, connection, whatever it is? Once you identify those values, you can start making decisions that are in alignment with them.
Okay, so it's like having this internal compass that guides you.
I like that analogy. It's about checking in with yourself and asking, does this decision, this action, does it align with who I want to be?
Which I'm guessing is not always an easy question to answer.
It's a process, for sure. And sometimes it's uncomfortable because it might mean going against the grain, doing things differently than how we were raised or what's expected of us.
And that can be scary. It's like we're so conditioned to seek approval, to fit in.
It's true. Well, what Manson reminds us is that at the end of the day, the only approval that really matters is our own.
Easier said than done, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sensing a theme here, this idea of self-awareness, being honest with ourselves about what we want, even if it's different from the norm.
You're picking up what I'm putting down. It's about recognizing those moments when we're acting out of insecurity or fear and choosing a different path.
A path that's aligned with our values, even if it's a little bumpy or uncertain.
Exactly. And that's where the freedom comes in. That's where the not giving a feek becomes liberating. Because when you're living in alignment with your true self, the opinions of others just don't hold as much power over you.
So it's not about becoming completely indifferent to what other people think, but rather it's about shifting our focus, right?
Absolutely. It's about caring less about external validation and more about that internal sense of knowing you're on the right path, even if others don't get it.
Which, let's be honest, can still be a bit daunting. Like, what if we make those brave choices and we still feel unsure, like we're still figuring it out as we go?
Well, guess what? That's normal. None of us have it all figured out, and that's okay.
It's like we're all works in progress, constantly evolving, and maybe that's the point. It's not about reaching some final destination of not giving a fick, but about the journey itself, the continual self-discovery.
Now you're getting it. It's
Yeah.
about embracing the uncertainty, the messiness of it all, and finding a sense of peace within that.
Because at the end of the day, isn't that what we all want? To feel at peace with ourselves, to live a life that feels true and meaningful, even with all its imperfections.
I think so. It's about accepting ourselves and life itself with all its ups and downs.
And maybe, just maybe, that acceptance, that willingness to embrace the imperfections, that's where we find true freedom. It's like we're always trying to prove something to someone, right? When maybe, just maybe, the real win is being comfortable in our own skin, whoever that happens to be.
Right. It's like, who are we trying to impress
Yeah.
and at what cost? Manson brings up a really thought-provoking concept in the book. It's from the anthropologist Ernest Becker.
Okay, lay it on me.
So Becker argues that what makes us human, well, a big part of it is our awareness of death. Like, we're the only species that can actually conceptualize our own mortality.
Whoa, yeah. Talk about a buzzkill.
Right. But here's the thing. According to Becker, this awareness of death, it's what drives us to create what he calls immortality projects.
Immortality projects. Sounds intense.
It's not as literal as it sounds.
Yeah.
It's basically anything we do to feel like we'll live on in some way, even after we're gone.
Yeah.
Building a legacy, having kids, chasing fame, even just creating something beautiful like art or music.
So it's that deep-seated need to make our mark on the world, to leave something lasting behind.
Exactly. And on the one hand, these immortality projects can be a powerful driving force in our lives. But, as Becker points out, they can also be a source of anxiety, even neurosis.
How so?
Well, we can get so caught up in this pursuit of legacy, of not being forgotten, that we forget to actually live our lives in the present moment.
It's like we're so busy building this monument to ourselves that we miss out on actually experiencing life as it's happening.
Precisely. And that's where I think Manson's whole philosophy of not giving a fink comes in.
Okay, I'm seeing the connection here. So how do we apply that not giving a fick attitude to this idea of legacy and death and all that existential stuff?
It's about letting go of the need to control how we're remembered, letting go of that fear-driven pursuit of immortality, and instead just focusing on finding meaning and purpose in the present moment.
It's like instead of stressing about our legacy, we should be savoring the journey, right?
Yeah,
Enjoying the ride, even with all its bumps and detours.
exactly. It's about embracing the present moment with all its imperfections and uncertainties and finding joy in the simple act of being alive. Because that's all we really have right this moment, right here.
Wow, when you put it like that, it really puts things into perspective. And it's funny, we often put off happiness, don't we? We tell ourselves, I'll be happy when I achieve this, or I'll be content when I have that. But the truth is, there's no guarantee of any of that.
Right. It's like we're always chasing this future ideal, and in the process, we miss out on the beauty of what's right in front of us.
And I think that's a big part of what Manson is trying to say in this book, that it's okay to let go of that need for certainty, for control. Because life is messy, it's unpredictable, and the sooner we embrace that, the sooner we can actually start living.
Beautifully said. It's about accepting that we don't have all the answers, and we don't need to. It's about showing up for our lives each and every day with intention and purpose and letting go of the rest.
I love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a fick, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
I think it boils down to this. Not giving a fick is not about being indifferent or apathetic. It's about being selective with our energy, about choosing our battles wisely, and most importantly, about focusing on what truly matters to us at our core.
It's about defining success on our own terms, living a life that feels authentic and meaningful, even if it means going against the grain, even if it means embracing a little discomfort along the way.
Yes, and remembering that it's a journey, not a destination. We're all works in progress, constantly learning and growing.
Absolutely. And on that note, to all our fellow deep divers out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep showing up for your lives with intention, with purpose, and with a healthy dose of not giving a feck about the things that don't truly matter. Until next time.